As we embark on this final morning together, I once again want to say a special thank you to the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, which was the principal sponsor of this event and also works tirelessly to be able to support organizations across Africa to achieve their goals. So thank you very much to the Hewlett Foundation. We appreciate the fact that you see us. Now, for 20 years, EAPN has been in the business of growth, of connecting, of making sure that we as individual organizations and as individuals working in the business of change are able to move forward. We've come from far as a community. We've even changed names along the way. But our purpose and our missions remain constant. And as we were told by the chair, this is a season of engaging, enriching, and empowering, but for a reason, not just because, but so that we can actually move forward. And so the question is, how do we sustain that moving forward? Because it can be tiring. The journey can be tiring, can it not? Sometimes when you're like, I feel as if I'm on a hamster wheel. But we're not actually on a hamster wheel. We've come from somewhere, and we're moving somewhere. But we need a little prod or poke or reminder as to why it's so important to keep these movements alive. And to keep us alive to what we're interested in doing in terms of building movements, we have a keynote speaker this morning, Brian Kagoro is the Director of Justice and Intersectionality at the Open Society Foundation. But more than that, he labels himself as a Pan-Africanist. He's dedicated his work, his life, to ensuring justice in various areas and countries and amongst different communities in this continent. And so I'd like to invite Brian to share with us, how do we sustain ourselves? How do we make sure that we're moving together in the right direction and we're moving together with the right purpose? Brian, good morning and welcome.
Jambo, good morning. Becky was amused, but Risa was more amused that he saw me carrying a book. And I think he was wondering what's in the book and whether there are notes in the book. Anybody who knows me is that I needed a blank page so that all of you can actually give me credibility by assuming that I'm organized. I actually did prepare, otherwise it's a splendid waste of your morning. One day, getting out of Johannesburg airport, I met a professor from Nigeria who told me a story that had just happened the previous day. Nigerian immigrant or visitor to South Africa was delayed, or flight was delayed, and instead of departing on the day that his visa ended, he ended up departing the next day. So at the airport, there was a lady, white lady, who then, in enforcing the law, said to the Nigerian man, "Sir, you have overstayed. Have to." So the guy is like, "What do you mean I overstayed?" I said, "How do you mean you overstayed? The only person who has overstayed here." I need to get into the topic. So the first one, the man said, the only person who's overstayed is you. Your ancestors came here 300 years ago and you are still here. This is, the second is Pentecostal preacher. Oh, sorry if you are Pentecostal, this is not a pronouncement on your religion. Pentecostal preacher, Catholic preacher, and Anglican preacher set to determine how they keep life and limb together. So the Catholic priest indicated that once every year they do a special collection, and the collection is given to the widows and the orphans. And because they have a vow of poverty, they keep a little to make sure that just the premises are kept. And the Anglican preacher said, well, we do slightly better. We do this every quarter, and we distribute towards maintaining our properties and also just making sure our bookshops as well as run. And the Pentecostal preacher looked at them. He must have been from Zimbabwe by his accent. He said, I am more gifted than God. I collect offering every day. And what I do is I put it in an open basket. I throw it all up and I say, God, whatever you want to keep up there, what comes down is mine. My friends, you are not a movement. You are a group of well-intentioned do-gooders who work for a salary but intend to do transformation in the lives of people who actually produce the food that they eat. In this room, very few of you produce anything. Yeah, so I'm hitting the right note. In essence, the contradiction about talking about building a movement, AGN, the East Africa Philanthropy Network, EPN, and others will tell you the phenomenal rise in numbers. Today, Evans asked me to come and talk candidly in a family discussion about the idea that you can be 900 kilometers wide and 1 inch deep. And I have no dispute with the fact that our breadth is phenomenal. The concern that should impel us towards collective action is how do we become a deeper? First things first, we must lose meaningless cliches. The first cliche is grassroots. The grass has no roots. If you dispute, go outside and pull out grass. Right. Number one. Number two, close to the ground. The people use the ground for a purpose. Capitalism uses the ground for a purpose. There is a conflict globally in the notion of proximity to the ground because the capitalist extractive industries have gone beyond closeness to the ground. They've gone into the ground to take away the wealth of the people. You're trying to be close to the ground does not resolve the contradictions in global production and reproduction. And you have become part of a colonial narrative, wittingly or unwittingly, that imagines the black world as confined to micro-enterprise, micro-production, micro-concern, survivalist humanitarian concerns. So you are proud in trying to say to global capital, come, let's move closer to the people, to the micro needs of the people, the micro concerns of the people. That is not revolutionary. The people did not become micro by choice. The colonial architecture of power destroyed African empires that were growing towards macro, that were macro, and created the idea of a micro-native who could not own a land to produce on, who could not own sheep, goats, cattle. They even stole them from the Khoisan. And then you were confined to a rondavel and a little productive area. If you were a nomadic pastoralist, you were confined to a narrow area, mostly non-arable, and where you couldn't live. So coloniality of power in global and African philanthropy has a fundamental implications for movement building. Neoliberalism, which we always talk about, is in crisis. Whether it's the climate or ecological crisis, the financial crisis, the security crisis we're seeing in Ukraine, Russia, and elsewhere, the energy crisis, or the crisis of democracy, where you are beginning to say there's a rise of elected authoritarianism. The process of elections is being used now to elect authoritarians. The multi-layered oppressions that feminists have been talking about for generations, the intersectionality of exclusions has become more accentuated. Yet historical privilege and injustice has also become accentuated. Defined around access to money and goods, but I want to suggest to you that access to money and goods historically has always been related to the market economy and laissez-faire capitalism and concentration of wealth. But these have been determined by the organization of people and factors of production during colonialism in our state. That you were put into rural areas, some people were put into urban areas. The urban was only to be accessed by Africans and black people if they were in the service of white interests. And then if you were brownish, not totally black, you were on the periphery of the urban, mostly where the sun hits you in the eye when you are going home and hits you in the eye when you are coming to work. Where the affluent or effluent or the wastage from industry flows to, Somadare, Korogosho, the slums in Kenya are not an accident of geography or poor planning. Nor is Kaelisha, King Williamstown, and etc. The Islamization and pauperization of people, who you want to be close to, the ground you wish to be close to, is a product of geospatial planning by particular forces and factors of production. Seems to me, my friends, that access to money and goods was also directly linked to access to culture, to language, to education, to freedom, and to opportunities. Now, the deprivation of opportunities linked to the planning of our cities, linked to macroeconomic policy, linked to broader macro policy, answers the following question: what culture, what language, what education, what opportunities you were able to access were based on Eurocentric constructs of what you were entitled to or the place you were assigned to as a black or brown person. But it also determined your socio-economic imagination, what you could imagine. So our parents wanted us to be nurses and teachers, not industrialists. Why nurses and teachers? Because the architecture of the colonial economy preserved a special place for the most elite amongst us to become premier servants of white capital, the elite of labor, and not the elite of leisure or leisure. You, my friends, represent a modern version of that elite of labor. It is not the poor people that need liberation, it is you. Because you appreciating that the growth of wealth in Europe and the USA through slavery, plantation agriculture, industrialization, through extractivism, and the new scramble for Africa, for critical minerals, for land, for water, will create new scarcity, which will make our people slaves, not in plantations elsewhere, but on our own lands. You are still trying to discuss the notion of building a movement, of making poor people have a place and a voice in a broadly neoliberal system that's becoming digitalized, militarized, and financialized. You are sleepwalking. Wake up. You see, my friends, colonization and imperialization as the basis of globalization created the social classification of our people around race, around indigenous, black, brown versus white, around conquerors and knowers versus the ignorant, around caste, around tribe, around hierarchization. It created hierarchies of humanity and the new structure of control of labor and its resources and production, whether through serfdom, slavery, wage earners, casual labor, and post-structural adjustment through informal workers, and now through unskilled workers. So, your children go to school, come out with degrees, even masters and PhDs, knowing absolutely nothing. They neither have the skill nor the capacity to transform the reality of the oppression that has bounded their people for generations. You know why? The little money that you have, you are investing in constructing literate ignorance. It seems to me that basic social classification and social cannot be disrupted, as Evans and others have been saying, until we realize you native out of the province of the local that was constructed by the other and the micro that was determined by the other. The black intellectual is grassroots in global intellectualism. The black capitalist is grassroots in global capital. They are mere clients or proxies. You are considered most educated if you can quote the most scholars from the Ivy League or Oxbridge schools, but you are not considered knowledgeable if you have an understanding of how to construct solutions for your own societies that are not based on reproducing stupid and silly legal categories of organization, of ethics, and of governance. I am a lawyer. I have practiced law. So for all those lawyers who think the world will fall apart if we don't have boards, courts, constables, and etc., I have good news for you. Braithwaite and Drowse, some Pacific scholars suggest that they are model missionaries and model mercenaries. Model missionaries are those people who imbibe the model so much and their inferiority so completely that they believe a model that has never worked in its place of origin will work somehow by inorganic fixation in the environment. They are total believers, converts. They are waiting for the heaven of regulation. If regulation constitutions could save countries, America would be saved, France would be saved. What we're seeing with the rise of the right, what we're seeing in America with the reductionism, relativism, and etc., tells us that regulation alone cannot save society. Society needs another premise of salvation, of liberation, and of freedom. You cannot, they say in the Shona language, be copying the notes of a dunderhead. So, my friends, extraction and wealth domination are linked to knowledge. The idea that links knowledge to race, knowledge to class, knowledge to geography is what you must disrupt. You cannot be liberated on the premise of regurgitation. You cannot be liberated on the promise of cramming. You cannot be liberated on the promise of acquisitive mimesis or trying to emulate. You cannot be liberated by, you can wear a suit, speak with the most fine French or English or Portuguese accent. You can even know the names of the cities and streets in London, in Lisbon and elsewhere. You could have gone to the finest Ivy League places and schools. But my brothers and sisters, the fact of the matter is you are in those premises, no matter how well positioned or placed, and I'm reasonably well positioned in global philanthropy, you are merely a native in the service of the empire. And sometimes, when we become elevated, such as some of us have become, you start getting delusions and illusions of grandeur that somehow you can save your people from themselves. I want to suggest to you that you are the one who needs salvation. So, colonization of culture created an impression that sees Africa as the past and historical, and Europe and the US as the future and modernity, a binary, a dualism. Modernity, rational, modern, and our people as irrational and mystical. So you will bring us to these resorts so that our friends from Europe and elsewhere can, after the menial business of attending our conferences and leaving a few dollars, go on safari to see the big five. You don't even sell our countries as places of knowledge. You don't sell our countries as places of innovation. You sell them as places of things that naturally occur, like flora and fauna. You confirm the Hegelian version of history that says Africa is not a place of history, or the notion that the native is in everything else an infant, but in vice or crime. So your advocacy focuses on corruption. Your advocacy focuses on ethics, because you have been led to believe that the sole problem with your people is they are unethical. Who persuaded you this? Men and women who took and turned into property your kith and kin, made them work on plantations, as though working for free under oppressive conditions was not enough, raped them, produced children, separated them from their mothers. Men and women who took everything, took land, took cattle. Men and women who actually in 2023 have the audacity to come and say, we apologize for the indiscretions of colonialism, but we will not make repair. Why? Because the body of the black person is worth no more than pity. Because black people have themselves, in asserting themselves in the world, never seen the question of equality and equity as the premise of negotiation. You Africans are disgusting because you come at the table. Save us from our tyrants. We don't mind being oppressed by you because you speak well and you have good high-rise buildings. Unfortunately, my friends, philanthropy that does not disrupt the system of global production and reproduction of goods, of services, and of knowledge, that concerns itself on how to create more palatable local conditions for the survival of the native, itself is a treacherous extension of imperialism. Can I repeat that? Philanthropy that does not concern itself with the disruption of the global system of production and reproduction of goods, of knowledge, of services, but preoccupies itself by creating more palatable conditions for the native at the localized level where they've been assigned by historical racist policies, is an accomplice of global imperialism, domination, and racism. You don't need to have a single white person in power, because the model missionaries and the model mercenaries of the system in government, their color won't matter because they have received the gospel. They will preach it in the absence of the master and enforce it too. So what are you? If the ideological essence of colonialism was the denial of all attributes of the humanity of the colonial people, the dehumanized physical and mental violence that turned our people into servile people, equality requires that we play the game not according to those rules, that we have different desires, different institutional architecture, different leadership forms, different norms, different conceptions of identity in phila and thropy, the two words separate. Why? Because we're not seeking validation from the West or from the East. The only validation we need is our own validation. And that is where the biggest problem is. It is not making sure that we have the right institutions, the right governance frameworks, as important as that may be. It is making sure that we can take collective action for our self-liberation. I want to suggest to you the philanthropic sector will not be liberated separate from the capital sector or the market sector. It will not be liberated separate from the state sector. There is a symbiotic relationship that joins you and the state elite that oppress you and the market elites that don't actually understand philanthropy. Together, you are conjoined at the hip because the means and ways through which we produce value and we add value are related to how the ecology in our environs will turn out and are related to the goods and services that we will supply or that will be supplanted and supplied by others. It is directly related to what public goods will be appropriated and privatized and no longer available to the people. It's related to what land, what water. It's related to what air. It's related to the quality of life. Like I said, my friends, you are the most sure vehicle for reimagination of the continent. Reimagination of liberation. To reimagine liberation, you need a notion of transmodernity. A decolonial philanthropy that does not reduce decoloniality to merely the change of the means and the volumes of money that donors give to us, that if they give us 3-year, multi-year, untethered funding, then we are okay. If the system of production and reproduction remains neoliberal, you are not okay. Your people will not okay. Your job will be okay. Your SUV will be okay. Your conferences will be in better hotels. But the plight of this continent won't be okay. So we need to separate the idea of money as liberatory, of regulation as liberatory, and the idea of knowledge as the premise of liberation. Mwalimu talked about self-reliance. The greatest fear is not money self-reliance. It's ideas and institutional self-reliance. I went to law school when an African practice became renamed alternative dispute resolution. Did you hear what I said? I went to law school when an African practice of resolving conflict was renamed alternative dispute resolution. And people had PhDs. They even set up a global ADR center. And the Africans had not yet institutionalized their practice and their way of life. They were still learning how to do antagonistic resolution of disputes when they had already internalized over centuries alternative dispute resolution. I started teaching at law school when an African practice of resolving conflict was renamed transitional justice. And people are getting PhDs in what? Transitional justice. I have a friend called Becky Moyo, with whom we worked in late 2009, 2010, when we're describing an African practice that's based on living life in solidarity, living life in mutuality, living life to humanize the other. And suddenly he needed to make sense to the white friends that he had from the global north and the funders. So the young man comes to me and said, I have an idea. I said, what is your idea? He said, you know, we need to set up something called African philanthropy. I said, that's nonsense. Well, we are here. It's called African philanthropy. So unless we have radical epistemological shifts, decolonial shifts, and shifts of knowledge, my friends, the increase that, and I now must prepare to shut up. Evans, when numbers increased in this amount, it is a blessing. The blessing is each time you have a huge gathering, you have a celebration. Each time you have a huge gathering, you have a concentration. Each time you have a huge gathering, you have a power. It could be a power of mediocrity, a concentration of fragmentation. It could be a celebration of idiocy, or it could be something different. This conference was called so that we say to each other, stop sleepwalking. Movement is not gathering a group of people, mimicking and echoing the same language. Movement is gathering a group of people who see liberty and the pathways to liberty, not, as Audre Lorde said, by using the master's tools, but who say the path that's walked is not our path. I told Becky Moyo and Tendai Mrisa that my grandfather took me to his farm. I had just been made a partner in a law firm, largely white law firm, and I was complaining about injustice and this, and I wasn't sure how I would rise because I was not known to anybody. And he took me and addressed me by my totem. We were standing on the edge of a bush, a forest, and he said in my Shona language, My son, the forest has no doorway. Every hunter enters where they do. The determinant is what they bring back. Many of you are trying to enter this forest of transformation using pathways and doorways used by others. The flora and fauna is exhausted on those pathways. Find new pathways into this forest of global transformation. But how do you do it? Considering you are beneficiaries of this thing that I've been describing. Philanthropy must be based on the people and their way of life and culture, not simply their geographic location. Right? Philanthropy requires mass action for self-liberation. Not mass conference, mass action. Mass solidarity action. The very fact that a few of you are talking about climate and you are using colonial language of loss and damage, and I keep telling people loss is something that occurs as a result of no one's fault. But if I come and take your bag, my sister, it's not loss. You get it? Yeah. So damage is something that occurs accidentally. If I come and break your window, it's not damage. It's breakage. How are you told? You know, it's like some thieves in Harare. They stole something from one of my companions. So I went, hey! They said, Blas, talk nicely. You know, the thieves in Harare tell you to talk nicely in order to get back what is yours. The global thieves tell you to talk nicely if you want your things back. My friends, sitting in this room, you are beneficiaries of mass struggles. You are not owners and riders of mass struggle. You are beneficiaries. It is not you empowering the people. The people have empowered you to be known internationally. The people have empowered you to have voice, to have a salary. The people have empowered you to be invited to diplomatic dinners. The people have empowered you to be invited to OSF, Ford, and etc. You're like a monkey in a cage. You are paraded as a sign, right? Have you ever been to a zoo? Have you ever seen animals in the zoo? Today I've come to say, unlock the door of the zoo. Because that zoo you are in does not make you a real tiger, a real lion, a real monkey, a real... You are only entertainment for those who have power. Have you ever seen people playing so close in the wild to a tiger or a lion? Have you seen them? The fact that they come to the zoo and even touch tiger, it's you. That's why you can be invited to every conference. You are tame. What am I saying? Diakumba used to say to me, avoid political, social, and epistemological placebos. Placebos are those things you give your children. They say, I'm ill. You know the child is not ill. Just give them something that looks like medicine. Afterwards, they are fine. So this psychological props to the system of domination, the myth of an inclusive society. Black masses need to organize independently for their own. African philanthropy, East African philanthropy needs to organize independently for the liberation of East Africa. The system of definition uses justifications and myths. You are the model missionaries and model mercenaries, but you could also become the biggest disruption. Because you would say, we've been there, we've seen it, it's a lie. My friends, to address social injustice is the true basis for wealth creation. Some of you have gotten into this myth. No, this is not about fighting poverty. It's about creating wealth. A system that produces mass poverty impoverishes. Our people are not poor. They are impoverished because the system has deliberately ordered production and reproduction such that certain people who give a lot in terms of labor get very little in terms of wages and time. You as philanthropy are not fighting poverty. You are not fixing poverty. You are not alleviating poverty. Because if that's what you are doing, you are emissaries of the empire and the colonial architecture. A movement is about disrupting the systems, global, regional, and national, that impoverishes our people. Addressing securitization and militarization and financialization. You know, I like Africans. technology came. They said, oh no, in order to, we need technology. You know, and Philip will tell you, I used to say to him, no, we don't need technology. We need to own and create technology. Can I repeat that? You are no more empowered because you have an iPhone. Even if it's iPhone 20, and you are using it, and you know how to be on Kindle and those things. You are just a high-end consumer with very little power. You don't determine the content, you don't determine the gadget, you determine nothing. In fact, what happens, your wealth and the wealth of your children is being spent buying gadgets so that you can consume some more of the rubbish that's produced everywhere else, and the disinformation and the misinformation. Technology offers this sector a space. You can't, as single organizations, invest in technology, but as a collective, you can invest in the development of technology. I'm sorry, you have to monetize it all. Otherwise, you develop it, a private firm will come, take it, sell it for billions, they become billionaires, and you become famous. Africans and fame. May God save us from fame, and our ancestors do. Right? You know me. I'm the this, I'm the this. Okay, so let me end. Rural stagnation. Your philanthropy has so far been a service of the empire because you focused on the misery of the urban area. You have even repeated the lie that to develop we need to walk out of the rural areas. Please don't be stupid. There is no single white or Chinese or Asian production on this continent that's created value in urban Africa. Most of the values, they go to the rural areas, extract natural gas, extract flora and fauna. You are complying. You are telling your people, leave the rural area. Come and be Mamamboga in the, when they've left the rural area, they've left it for who? For those who are coming to find critical minerals, who are trying to set up solar factories, solar. My friends, I don't know who bewitched you, but today I came to say to you, please step out of this witchcraft moment where you repeat urbanization. 75% of Africans will live in urban areas. It's repeated until we believe it, until we affirm it and start preparing for it. Why are Africans living in urban areas? Because we have enforced through policy rural stagnation. Why have we enforced through policy rural stagnation? Because there are very few minerals under the city of Nairobi, right? Other than Johannesburg, most mineral wealth in our countries is found in rural areas. That's why we need Africans out of rural areas so that they can come and live in slums, so that we can now be running philanthropy to give them water, to give them wash services, to give. And we feel we have empowered them. Give land to our people, make our people productive, create factories for our people, give them resources to set up technology manufacturing firms. Lastly, organic intellectualism. My friends, I hope I have insulted you because it was my intention to, but I hope I have also encouraged you because it is the accidental view that when you insult, you encourage. You are the greatest Africans that have ever lived, greater than Nkrumah, greater than Cabral. Nkrumah did not know what you know. Nkrumah did not have the sort of access to this continent and its different parts that you have. Nkrumah did not have access to libraries and to knowledge and to the range and diversity of Africans that you have. Nkrumah did not have the number of African friends that you have. It is a tragedy that having so many friends, being part of such a great network, when you come to these conferences, you spend half your time saying, I'm the executive director of this. Oh, so who are you with? I'm with this. Those are mere post boxes. You are not a post box. If in this conference all you've done is traded business cards and emails and phone numbers so that you can touch each other on WhatsApp, then it's a betrayal of why Evans brought us here. Evans brought us here so that we answer, how do we build movements? We build it through complementarity of our different skills. We build it through diversity of our different passions. We build it by beholding how the whole system of oppression affects us at the same time differently, but requires that we press it at the same time differently in order to move, not the needle. We are no longer moving needle. We have to move the pillars. Otherwise, if you keep on moving needles, the pillars will solidify. My friends, you are such awesome and great geniuses. You are such unbelievable advocates. But unfortunately, you have become addicted to narratives of the empire about shifting money. Money does not shift power. You want to know why? The empire is getting you to play lotto. Each one of you think you will win. You scratch a couple of numbers and you wait for the win. Who makes money when you play lotto? The owner of the lotto. Who's making money when you do what you are doing, saying philanthropy? The owners of philanthropy. Who's determining the direction of philanthropy? Who's determining the nature of funding of philanthropy? Who's determining the shifts in philanthropy? Who's determining the engagement of global power of philanthropy? Who's determining these things? It is not you. You are asking for voice. Voice. Can you pinch yourself and just say, wake up? Voice. I was in Dubai once, and I was telling, I think my sister at the back there, I was in Dubai once, and my friend was on the 90th floor, and I was whistling, because in our village I would whistle, they would hear me. So I thought they would hear me. They did not hear me. Then I started shouting, "Hey, Diva! It's Brayo!" They did not hear me. That's your voice when it's facing the structure of global power. You can whistle, you can shout. Until you build an alternative building, or you enter and disrupt that building and the alarm goes on. Your voice projects are a betrayal of the revolution and transformation that we need. You are the placebo that our people have been taking. So since the timekeeper told me 10 minutes ago that I was done, and I am like all good speakers, I don't know when to stop when I finish. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Are we awake? We're awake. Nkrumah said, I look neither east, and I don't look to the west. I face forward. So let's move into that forest, facing forward, finding and forging our own paths. I'd like us to move to our next panel, and I would like to introduce the moderator for that panel, Janet Ruminju, who's the head of programs for Africa for Transformed Trade, where she and her organization are working to make sure that communities are at the center of the conversation of trade and climate justice. Janet, welcome, and come and introduce your panel.
Thank you. So thank you, and good morning. Yes, so we want to have a discussion along collective approach to adaptation and resilience in philanthropy. And I want to take this opportunity to invite our speakers this morning who are going to share with us from their experiences so that we can have actions to take home to help us to enhance adaptation and resilience. So I want to invite Yuji Ibasira from Rwanda Development Organization. Kindly help me to invite him. Welcome, Yuji. I also want to invite Atea Sumar, Country Director for Aga Khan Foundation, Tanzania. Welcome, Atea. And our next speaker is Angela Kaluleni from Save the Children. She's the Country Director for Tanzania. Angela, welcome. So thank you and welcome. And Yeah, we are delighted to have these very experienced speakers with us this morning. And our focus is on few areas around this topic. So we'll be focusing on shifting power, partnership and innovation to help us achieve adaptation and resilience, and crafting resilience and localization agenda. So thank you, and because of time, we just want to go straight to the discussion this morning. And I want to welcome my speakers, and you will tell us how your organization your work resonate with this topic for this morning as you introduce yourself, so we can have Atea.
So I thought let me address the elephant in the room, the small elephant. The bigger one was addressed earlier. So I recently suffered an episode of Bell's palsy, and so if you do not understand what I'm saying, please ask me to repeat it. It's getting better. And then initially I thought that maybe I shouldn't attend, but then I thought Malala wouldn't have been Malala if she didn't go and speak up while her face was still disfigured. And then I thought you can't be not resilient on a personal level and then go and work for an organization or go and talk about the topic, which needs to be, when you need to speak about resilience. So I decided to be resilient, courageous, and come here and speak. So, thank you. So I work for the Aga Khan Foundation in Tanzania, which falls broadly under the Aga Khan Development Network, which has 8 different agencies, but I will speak about the Aga Khan Foundation, which does the social and community community work. We are in 18 countries, and in East Africa, although we work in Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique, Uganda, Madagascar, we try to do as much regionally when it comes to projects and programs as just in individual countries. We have a variety of thematic areas, but one of the things about the Aga Khan Foundation that I feel is the key ingredient for its success and a long-lasting nature is its ability to innovate, be flexible, be in touch with the communities, and tackle current challenges. And these are the things I admire about the Aga Khan Foundation. So for example, while the rest of the world is talking about net zero by 2050, the Aga Khan Development Network through Prince Hussein and through Prince Hussein has committed that we will become net zero by 2030. So that is a current challenge. That is a challenge facing the most poorest countries, the most marginalized and vulnerable communities, whereas we do not produce those emissions. We are at the receiving end of those products, and it is our lives and our livelihoods which are in danger. And so we have taken that step that we will reduce carbon emissions by 2030. So this is an example of how we are one step ahead and very much in tune with what the world currently needs. Similarly, we are now investing and working with the local communities in climate resilient agriculture. So we are training local communities, especially women and youth. As you know, we had Ukraine, but Africa can also be the food basket of the world. I think somewhere I heard I don't remember who, but when Brian was talking, someone said, but we brought knowledge. No, I don't think so. Knowledge is vast and varied and different. And then there is knowledge, and then there is wisdom, and then there is technical knowledge. Just because something is discovered by someone doesn't mean it never existed. Africa is famous for its knowledge of agrarian communities, of agriculture, of its wisdom. So we are going back to the roots where Africans were growing their own food, organic food, and then we got introduced to pesticides. And now we have to reverse the entire process and go back to basic natural African values of eating clean food. So these are some of the things that we are working on at present within the Aga Khan Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Angela, you can tell us about how your work is demonstrating adaptation and resilience, and share with us some of the pathways to adaptation.
Thank you so much.
Localization.
Thank you. Good morning. So I work for Save the Children Tanzania country office, and within the Save the Children movement, we work in more than 90 plus countries. So we have a framework that we are working with, and Tanzania specifically has adopted the localization agenda in really looking at how we can shift our ways of working and remodeling our internal systems to be able to really align ourselves with what we see is the most appropriate for the people that we support. So for us, Save the Children, really, it begins with our approaches to child participation. We are Save the Children. We work to really engage and voice for children and empower children to really voice their concerns and be the ones who are articulating what are their concerns, what are their challenges, and really our new ways of working and remodeling that we are currently implementing looks at how that is implemented in a more systematized way. So we look at child participation, we look at community engagement, and we look at how we can really go down to the communities and begin from like very baseline, basic things like how do we get their input from before we even design our programs. What do you need? What do you think are your challenges? And we collect that information that informs us when it comes to even designing the projects that the communities would want. We engage them when we are now looking at the entire design, and we take children to be at the table. And we actually demonstrated this where we even do advocacy with children, where we just, what we need, and I would still want to use empower them, because Brian has given us some new insights here, but I would still want to say that you have children who have ideas, but some of them, because of many issues around communities, they are scared even to stand. So we work with children and tell them that you have your voice, you know your issues, tell us what are you facing on the ground. We support them with packaging the information in a way that when they engage with policymakers, it makes sense. So we do that with youth groups. We have youth advisory bodies and councils that work with us, and they give us advice in terms of how we program in a way that is really responsive to their needs. Communities, they have all the information. They know where the power sits. They know what are their underlying causes and root causes of what is happening within communities, whether it's a health issue, it's a livelihood issue, it's an education issue. we sit with them in community groups and we ask them to choose their own leaders among themselves, who is the most trustworthy person who can really lead and everyone can resonate around. And they tell us what they need to do. So that has been part of the things that we are doing at the moment, and maybe we can explore more.
Yeah, thank you so much. Eugene?
Thank you very much. I work with an organization called Rwanda Development Organization. It was created in 1995 after the mass of genocide in Rwanda that claimed close to 1 million people, left so many people homeless, helpless, and so many refugees all over, within and without. So given such a situation, Rwandans were confronted with so many challenges, but they made 3 choices. One is to think big. Thinking big means when you are caught in a storm, try to withstand the storm and fly high, like an eagle. And this has helped us to occupy spaces that are not congested. I'll explain. 2, we decided to be united. Being united, we believed in the unity of purpose, and we thought that diversity is richness. And then, unlike the previous government that used diversity to create contradictions, we felt our diversity was our riches. Third, we agreed that we need to be transparent and accountable to the people we work for and to ourselves, such that when we are working together, we are actually working to the aspirations of the people we work with. So informed by that background and by the challenges that we faced at the time, Rwanda Development Organization adopted an approach of working with the communities to, one, first of all, support them to get food, but we believed that it's better to teach you how to fish than giving you a fish so that you can fish yourself. And in so doing, we do build the capacities and skills of the people that we support to increase food production, to enhance the entrepreneurial skills, and also we support mostly women and other vulnerable communities in off-farm activities so that they can go into weaving, tailoring, handicrafts. The approach we use is that we don't support you perpetually. We ensure that we work towards empowering you and you graduate so that you can help yourself and help others. And in so doing, over time, we put in measures to graduate, and we ensure that we are empowering you so that we don't keep helping you, but instead you help yourself and help others in future. I want to give an example. Among the communities we supported, now we have the farmers that used to benefit from our services that are now bidding for national, international bids on agricultural commodity supplies. 2, we have agro dealers that now are counted among the national agro dealers that supply inputs. 3, the people we supported in handicrafts and weaving now have markets in the US and now one of the exporters of the homemade goods. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Eugene. Yeah, we can see how the community engagement is key, engaging the community, putting them at the center of decision making in the work that you do. Now I want us to hear from Atea on how we leverage power differential in the localization agenda. and especially toward getting support for the marginalized communities.
So first of all, I would like everybody to put their phones down for a second. And done? Does anybody know what is the origin of the word philanthropy? Where does it originate from? Anyone? Yes?
It's a word in Greek, from Greek, so philia means love, like philia as in filios, so like love. So it's, yeah, so it basically means like love.
Yeah, great, thank you. So philia, philos, philan, it's a Greek word which means love, and anthropy, like us, anthropos, so in the love of humanity. So I think it's really important to make this context that we are not talking about aid, we are not talking about things like those, but we are talking about philanthropy, which also in Kiswahili there is a word called Ubuntu. Because you are, so I am. Can anyone quickly just name a few philanthropists, the ones which come to your mind, quickly? Sorry, I can't hear. Sorry? Chandaria. Okay. Anyone else? Any philanthropists? Thank you. Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Anyone else? Sorry, I can't hear you. Yourself. Yes. Just a couple more famous philanthropists. Any other philanthropists? Who? No, not the foundations as such. Maybe names. I want names. The same names which, names which opened the foundation. What are those names? Mo Ibrahim. That's the first African philanthropist somebody mentioned right now. So if we are decolonizing philanthropy, do we have more than one African philanthropist we can think of? Sorry? Chandaria. Yes, Aliko Dangote. Great, thank you. I wanted to hear those names and kind of bring that vibe in the room. Before I answer your question, and this is an answer to your question, but I like to tell stories. So I don't know if you have heard the story about the elephant, that one day a friend was walking with his friend who used to train elephants, and he saw that the elephant's ropes were open, but the elephant was not moving. He thought he was tied to a tree. And the friend asked him that, why is he not moving, although his ropes are open? So he said, as a child, when elephants are babies, we tie them so that they don't run away. But then when they grow up, they don't realize that they have outgrown their chains and they are able to escape any moment. But they have been conditioned to think that this is how it is supposed to be. So when we are approaching philanthropy, how are we conditioned to think? Because at one point we were the dark continent, and then there was the scramble for Africa, and now we are the partner of choice. So do we think, why is Africa now the partner of choice for philanthropy? You know, there has to be a shift, a change in our mindset. We are not just at the receiving end. we have something to give. And number one in that is a burgeoning human population, a youth population, which is exposed to a global village. So I think I like the term partner as opposed to beneficiary or recipient. And therefore, when we talk about decolonizing philanthropy, then it means contextualizing philanthropy. What has worked for years may not work now. And it should be us who should know our context better than anybody else. And we should be able to sit on the table and say, in our context, this works. In African wisdom, this works. You know, works. So I would say the ball is in our court now. It is us who, this is the moment for that shift. We will decide, are we the elephant who has understood that those, that we have outgrown those chains and we have much more to offer? Or are we still thinking that we are chained? I think when it comes to talking about power, this is the best way that I can explain it. You have to break those chains.
Thank you so much for putting it in that context. And in line of what Atea have shared, I would like us to get from Angela and Eugene the aspect of partnership and innovation in this agenda of localization of development. What is the role of different stakeholders, such as the government, the private sector, as well as the community, in enabling transformation and enhancing adaptation and resilience? What's the role? Yeah, thank you. We can start with Angela and then Eugene.
Thank you so much, Janet. So for us at Save the Children, we consider the different players that we have who bring, you know, various strengths to really complement what Save the Children offers. We have in our pool of philanthropy, the young generation, the next generation, who are tech savvy, or they may have knowledge. They are rising stars. They have, you know, a pool of young people behind them, but they just need, and they have money. Some of them have quite a lot of money, and they are happy to invest, but they don't know how to invest it in a more strategic way. We tap into that as a resource that we can complement the efforts towards the outcome that we want to achieve for children. We also have a pool of foundations who may have money, or they may be a strategic partner to us for various reasons. One, it could be the power that they own. It could be in the list of retired presidents, or who have formed foundations, or it could be first ladies who have, you know, they hold power that can really influence policy change. They can influence advocacy work and really help us to really move the work that we really do with children or for children. We also have a pool of the diaspora, who are, you know, in various countries. They want to invest back home, and they don't know how to do it. And we work with them to really bring change and really invest together. What we do and what has really worked for us, we also have, sorry, I forgot, we also have, now we use them in the, to borrow what Atea has just said, in the knowledge kind of category. We have the LG, the local governments and the communities at large. And for us, we consider them as another, you know, in courts, another sort of a philanthropy, who has knowledge, who has really influence. And when we work with them, we see that there is complementarity in improving the lives of children. And when we partner, we complement each other, and there's much bigger impact. What we have seen in the innovation that we are seeing at the moment is our ability to layer on top of the funding that we get from institutional donors. Sometimes we are able to, it's confined, we are able to implement in certain regions, and we are not able to do everything that we would have loved to do. But because we are working with LGAs through the structures, the government structures, and we are supporting them really in our various interventions to have them lead the efforts, coordinate the efforts so that there's, sustainability in what we are doing. So we layer on top of what the funding that we already have, for instance, from institutional. We have some, good givers who are telling us we only have 200,000 or maybe 20 million only, but we tell them this is something for us because we can layer this. We have a project, for instance, in Dodoma that we layered on top of one of our big health and nutrition programs, and we were able to capture only a proportion of first-time mothers who are teenagers who dropped out of school, and they were there helpless. The society is labeling them as young people, and we brought this small amount of money on top of this other bigger portfolio that was not targeting them, and we were able to bring huge change to their lives. We started doing livelihood activities with them. We started linking them to markets. We started doing quite a number of things that really were able to improve their livelihood and to really empower them in a positive direction. So that's how I can say some of the innovations that we're doing, and they are quite revolutionary in the space that we are working.
Thank you very much. I just want to start from where my sister started from, asking who is a philanthropist here. All of you think that philanthropists should be coming from the north. But we are philanthropists ourselves if you want. I just want to give an example. In 2012, for bad intentions, donors decided to stop funding for land. Most of them come together for some bad intentions to say we have stopped your funding because there was a port somewhere. Okay. Then the others themselves say, okay, if you have stopped your money, for us we are going to do it. From the diaspora, from within, elderly, the young, we decided to contribute generously, and we surpassed the budget that we beheld. And once they picked wind of what we are doing, they revisited their decision, said, okay. One by one, coming back, said, okay, we can give you. Actually, they gave you more than what they were supposed to give. So it depends on how we behave that shapes what we get. Two is how we confront challenges. Recently, we heard that we had floods because of climate change. The water that came, some lives and properties destroyed. Instead of flying all over, seeking support from donors, we have got these problems, ABCD. One has decided, because of the digital era, we use the SMSs. And the SMS, we contributed. They gave out the number, and the results are away. were able to contribute 12 million USD. On abundance within the space of 1 month. We are donors ourselves, this is one. Two, she was asking about the local innovations. The local innovations, those are one, some of them. But I did talk about the coordination mechanism that will be helped to shape the space that we operate in. I also want to give an example. There is a project we were undertaking of supporting farmers to access the market with their produce, but there was no fund. What we did was we approached one of the banks. He said it is called the Big Bank of Ghana. It's one of the biggest banks in the country. He said one of the big banks are also farmers in the country have the highest portfolio than these traders in the city. Assuming you engage with them, they will believe most and tap into their resources because of other banks. I was saying, there are risks with it. He said, no. There is an insurance company that is out there that is willing to support them to ensure their commodities. Okay? Commodities are illicit. We brought in an off-taker that was let them buy off using for delivery contracts, even before they produce. And we approached him, we said, if you want to tap into the commodities of all these people without any competition, please don't live with them. And he said, okay, wait is there. We said the bank is there, the insurance is there, and you are there. So how can I help? He said, some of these people are some of the tools they want to use for production. Some of these people lack collaterals, but they have contracts. Can the banks give them loans? Then we stood in as their guarantees. And finally, we all came together. For the first season, twice as many farmers were able to access the loans. Before the rate was 0. And the banks were able to get more deposits than they had been doing. Now it's the simplest flow of partnership. This is one of the innovative ways of raising resources without going outside the country. Two, there is another way that we don't actually spend more, but we could have spent less on the same outcome. This is because I support this person, you support the same person, another person supports the same person. You find you actually are aggregating yourselves on the same person, using so many resources, but actually we see the output. So, what we've done in Rwanda locally is we have instituted what we call joint action program at the district level. All the actors that work at that level do subscribe and are members of that joint action government plan. And before you undertake any activity, you have to produce your plan. And this is to ensure that there is no duplication and overlap of intervention. If you have 20 million and you are buying cows, ensure that who is benefiting from your cows. And previously, some people were actually naming names and numbers without delivering anything, simply because they have been supported by others. And this is no one because they have been everywhere and elsewhere. So this has created efficiency of resources that are used. It It has created accountability and transparency, and people are able to achieve more with the less of resources that I built. Lastly, I want to say that what you do for me without me is against you. You have to work with the people that you support. And before your plan of action is accepted, the beneficiaries have to say against that plan. And always there is evaluation against that plan. And the beneficiaries are part of the evaluation team. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for those practical actions that can be taken. And I would want us to look at authenticity of the philanthropy, and I want to request a chair to really guide us on how we can build authentic localization of resources.
I can share my view. You know, when I woke up on the 20th, 19th or 20th of June, and my face was asymmetrical. I just woke up like that. And I couldn't do much. I was anxious and worried, and so I spent a lot of time reflecting. And the word asymmetry just kept coming to my mind, and I knew I had to come here and speak. And here also we are speaking about asymmetrical, asymmetry. There are lives which are not symmetrical, and as philanthropists, we want to bring them somewhat close to symmetry. This happened to me overnight, but these asymmetries in the African continent and Asian continent and all other continents where there is marginalization and vulnerability didn't happen overnight. Now, because you're talking about authenticity, I think my view is that these asymmetries stem from historical injustices and ongoing injustices that have shaped these realities. And so, as philanthropists, first and foremost, is we have to learn from history to address these deep-rooted symmetries. We don't have to dwell in the past. We have to move on. We have to let go. We have to live together. But we need to learn from these inequalities. You know, like they say that when the colonizers came, they gave us the Bible. And they said, close your eyes and pray. And when we opened our eyes, we had the Bible and they had the Lamb. What have we learned from that? So let us sit as equal partners in our context and be authentic about our needs. Philanthropy should not be driven by bureaucracy, capitalist agendas, but it should be driven by what is the need of that community. So I would start by saying that we need to study and learn from history and then listen to the voices and opinions of those who are directly affected by these changes, by these inequalities, listen and work with the local communities and develop solutions together with them. So this is something which is at the root of Aga Khan Foundation, is that when we work in a community, we go in with them, we develop solutions with them, we learn from them. It has happened many a time when we have been doing agriculture and we have not been able to come up with an organic, healthy solution, but it is the farmer's wisdom who has taught us that why don't we do this? We have been doing this for years. We do that. We stay with the community for years. One of our largest programs in Africa is in Zanzibar, which is called the Madrasa program, which has been running for over 40 years. So we work with the local communities in such a way that when we leave, that program is sustainable and running by itself. So that has to be philanthropy. Philanthropy is not aid that every time we have to pop it in. Philanthropy is that, okay, out of the love of humanity, out of Ubuntu, we are here, we have supported it, now we take it on. So working with local communities, listening to them, and then it is about partnerships, which for me this is the most important part, partnerships which are built on trust, respect, and collaboration. There is nobody who is at the giving end and there is nobody at the receiving end. Everyone has something to give. Money is not the defining term. Resources are of various natures. So that is, so those are my thoughts. And another thing I would say that to be authentic, we also need to adopt an intersectional lens and consider the interconnected nature of these inequalities. They are inequalities, but they are interconnected. And how can we navigate these complexities and work towards comprehensive solutions? So to be authentic, I think these would be a few of my tips. But never, never compromise on your authenticity. We have seen what happens when we did that. Your own identity, your own wisdom, your culture, your way of living is authentic and something to be proud of. I believe that whether it is in philanthropy, whether it is in culture, whether it is in education, identity and authenticity are really important.
Thank you so much, Chair. And on the same, maybe the other speaker, Eugene or Angela, you have something to add on that?
Yes, I have something to add there. And when it comes to the point of partnership and collaboration, recently we've been partnering with one of the philanthropy here in Tanzania, and actually they are here as well attending this meeting from the corporate sector to really look at how we can partner. What I've learned in the course of our few months of collaborating, really coming with evidence-based approaches and what is really required, getting information, like Sarah said, from the people who are at the point of service delivery, where we need to take the intervention. We were discussing with them regarding actually it's NMB Bank. We were discussing with them regarding a marathon that we are preparing to get resources, fundraise to build a breastfeeding meals bank. So when we went to the government to discuss with them regarding the idea, because we knew that it's a need, they told us, before you start there, why don't we start with looking at how we can change the breastfeeding behavior that, for instance, the working mothers have. So our agenda at the moment should be doing a marathon that will bring the young people, will bring men, will bring the policymakers, will bring all key players and address the behavior change that we need. And then the other structural part would come later. So it was really an aha moment where we say that you may have resources, you may have key players, but really getting evidence from and you'll be more informed and you'll make decisions based on what is the actual need on the ground. The other quick example that I can share in our health nutrition program, when we went to we wanted to do a livelihood program, and we were to give them small animals as a startup within the women groups. And we went with an idea of distributing rabbits and and chickens and all that. So in one of the communities, they told us, we don't eat rabbits. We eat a different type of animal, and we had to readapt, our approach to really address what the communities, need. And eventually, it became a very successful program because they started, dividing and kind of rolling on, passing on the animal in other families, and eventually almost the entire village and a number of districts had those animals, and now they are going beyond just eating, but now they are selling, and women are making money, they are becoming more empowered and making decisions within their families for their livelihood. So I think what Atea is saying, and what I'm also reinforcing, is that really authentic means also getting informed and making informed decisions in programs around what are the actual needs based on the input from communities. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Authentic philanthropy and the localization, I think it also depends on the context and nature of the philanthropy. I also want to be practical and give examples. In our social protection program, we support the vulnerable communities to overcome the post-COVID shocks by supporting them with cows, giving them some essential amenities. But we do it as one. For example, there is a program that we have called One Cow Per Family, Jiringa program. In Jiringa program, it's one is coming together. The cattle keeping communities, giving to communities that don't have cows, for example, those are philanthropists. And eventually, everyone has a cow for milk and for fertilizers. We do school construction. Recently, also after COVID, there was a belief that the number of students for one teacher have to decrease. So doing, we increase the number of classrooms. I think it happened all over East Africa. When the World Bank was approached to support, it counted so many, estimated so many millions to do that. What we did was, let's use the little money that we have, and let one do the Muganda community work to construct classrooms. It's only where we need the technical and skilled labor that we employ the money. But where we required unskilled labor, one themselves did it over that. Two is when we are talking about supporting communities to overcome their challenges, it's only when you understand their challenges that you are able to settle them. And in so doing, we sit together as communities and understand what we need. How can we need it? But the problem is perpetual support. In most cases, if you are supporting them to harvest rainwater and you do it 100%, they always say these are storage facilities for other people. We're not saying it's a house. If it's a lot that has been constructed, they say this is a lot for so and so. Actually, it's their lot. Because they don't see themselves part of that system. What we are doing is, how much are you giving yourself, are you able to offer that they can support you? In that manner, they all have to that contribution, because they are also trained to contribute. This is the nature of community giving that we have now devised next. Because previously, people were becoming a bit less and saying, UNHCR is giving this much. They are giving us these cows. They are constructing this school. Actually, to the extent you are building, you're constructing a house for somebody. one door gets off, and he waits for you to come and fix it. At one point, through the human security support, one person was told to put up a decent reaction. And he said there needs to be somebody to do it. And then a community leader said, okay, can you do it and we pay you? Then the owner of the toilet was flattering it. Then he came back to say, can I be paid? He said, for what? Actually, initially he said you were vulnerable, but now you want to realize you are able to do it yourself. This is the nature of the people that we live with, and this is the money that we spend. Actually, when the people we spend on are able to support themselves, so we should be selective.
Thank you so much for that practical experiences. And I would imagine that as facilitators of this transformation, there are limitations that you have encountered in those challenges, and the learnings that you wish to share with the delegates so that we have something to take home as we are also facilitators of this localization development. You kindly share with us some of those experiences and learning, and any one of you can start off the discussion.
Thank you. One of the challenges is that we are actually faced with a lot of demands with limited resources. Resources are very scarce. Two, we still have mindset issues where the poor people feel they have to be totally supported. And it's only when you are raising somebody's hand to raise up, when he is also when he has the way to raise up, that you raise up. But when you keep, in physics they say the third law of Newton, the application of force moving through distance zero is always zero. So if you support somebody when he is not able to support you, after at the end of the day, the work is zero. Three, we are not exploiting the digital end, where the internet is here just for tweeting, blah, 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 but we are not using it to actually reflect on the work that we are doing.
I can say that there is quite a lot of work that we can do together, and through partnership, the work that we can do is more impactful. And one of the limitations that I've seen, especially when it comes to collaborating with FBOs and CSOs, is the limitation that we, especially the giant organizations, where we tend to provide only program money, and then we expect the CSOs and FBOs, small organizations, to implement good programs without additional support, especially for unrestricted funding. That would really help them to build their own internal systems so they can also continue to really be strong organizations. So we are now really advocating for them to receive unrestricted funding, just like any INGO or any big organization, to really continue to improve their internal systems, even including being able to retain their own talent, their own human resource that can continue to work for those organizations without running to other big organizations. So I think that has really been important, and really leverage the power of capacity strengthening, because we need that. I know that there is quite a lot of discussion around there is capacity, there is enough capacity within CSOs and FBOs, which is very, very true. But I think we also need to appreciate that even for large NGOs like Save the Children, we continue to really build our capacity, internal systems. We vote for technology for development and all of that. And we should do the same, because we expect a lot when we collaborate, when we examples, like even here in Zanzibar, with organizations that we work, when they came to us, they knocked the doors and they said, here we are, we have passion to work for and support children, support women, support people living with HIV/AIDS, but we do not have any tools in place. We do not have any policies that would really help us sell ourselves and get resources. And we worked with them, and we saw the power of us embracing that partnership. And now we partner, and we have even flipped the coin. They prime in some of the funding opportunities, and we become their staff. And we see there's quite a lot of power there and quite a lot of revolution in when we embrace that in the way we partner and look at the opportunity we have to build the capacity in the specific area. Thank you.
So I agree with what my uncle have said. In addition, I feel that the localization approach, there are two things with it. One is that it is a top-down approach. This is the money, this is the program, we will build your capacity, implement it, this is how you will report. It is not a holistic approach where there is co-creation with the local partners according to the current capacity that they have while their capacity is being built. Reporting is very financial and material as opposed to impact-based, and therefore I feel that we come to a point in the MES system where tweaking becomes a bit late. So when you are going to see the impact, it is a bit too late now to say, oh, we didn't have the right impact, because the focus is so much. And I'm not saying that that is a wrong focus at all. There has to be a focus on transparency, accountability, responsibility. Capacity has to be built, but it has to be holistic. And impact, I think, should be impact, co-creation, and current capacity have to be at the nexus of localization.
Thank you so much. You have put it so clearly. And now I want to give a few minutes for questions from the delegates or feedback. Yes.
Will listen to. My name is Naomi Barasa. I am from Kenya. I grew up in Islam. I still work in Islam. I grew up in arguably the second largest slum in Nairobi, in Kenya, Korogosho. And I have been listening to all the conversations we've been having, and even this one. And I dare ask, because I feel like it's itchy. We've been talking about decolonizing philanthropy, shifting power, and all this time we are talking about using softer language, quoting words, like I've had every day. So when I talk about slums in Nairobi, in Kenya, people in philanthropy tell me, don't call them slums, call them informal settlements, call them people's settlements. And I'm thinking, why? And they say it's not dignified. And I wonder, if it's not dignified by name, how indignified are the slums themselves? And if we do not want to hear an indignifying name, are we prepared to change the conditions that are in those communities? And related to these conversations, I keep hearing about donors and for me, I think we need to be honest at this point and say we are happy to talk about these names, change names, only if they mean change of conditions to the African conditions and the African situations we have. Otherwise, for me, it doesn't matter if you're called beneficiaries or partners or recipients or whatever it is, if it doesn't change the African conditions. And I feel that we need to be a little more bold and encourages and just say, look, it's time we stop. We are happy to use those words as long as they make sense, because then they remind you how dignifying the African conditions are. Thank you.
Looking more into really the name itself, but I want to really put a comment out there on the fact that some of us may not have come from slums, but we've come from situations which were very difficult, which if we unpack from the heart of everyone here, I think we can get quite emotional stories. But I want to say that out of those situations, the slums, maybe I should just use that word, there has come quite strong young people who are leaders today. And for us, concerned children, from our humanitarian responses and emergency responses that we have, and through our child participation in youth empowerment, we've raised quite a number of great leaders. And some of them are back and working in our organization. We have in the level of country directors, in the levels of regional directors, and from different events. In Nairobi, we have quite a number of them who are coming from the Somali maybe refugee camps, and we have from Igoma, from our responses, quite a number of powerful young men and women who are really rising up to become leaders. And I myself, even though I did not come from maybe Islam, but I have a history, and who I am today, where I am today, is a journey that I can share with my peers, my colleagues, that there's quite power when empowerment is allowed, and when communities are allowed to really showcase the leadership that they have from within. Thank you so much.
I just want to share with my sister a saying in a novel called Keynote.
Says, not all Ghana lads were born in the gutter, and not all Ghana lads will die in the gutter. I lived. This is supporting in the law. I lived personally a worst life. I was a refugee myself. I lived in the shelters in a solid state and a slum, psychologically tortured. But I do believe that it is through the weather, it is through withering in the storm that you can raise higher than the clouds. So, one of the services offered by the government can help people living in the slums to change and transform their lives into better situations. But it's also the people living there that can also thrive, benefit from the services offered to change their own lives. We have a story to tell, and so many have lived your life.
Thank you so much. And maybe before I tell you respond to that, there are two questions. Because of time, please keep it very brief, 1 minute, and then perhaps you can answer it and
my question would be around philanthropic lens from a level of development and philanthropic lens from a level of human rights. Why am I saying this? Before COVID, in most of the time in Kenya, we used to tell people, please support your work. Most people, this. But when COVID came and we had to step up and work with our community towards the risks, believe you, we got a lot of support. More than even $10,000. We did someone asked for here's the money because of
but you people are supporting the community. So people are able to support. So my question to the panelists, why are we as philanthropy ready to support the development that is quote-unquote humanitarian and not resource or, let's say, resistance work that holds government accountable, and not being able to support the ones in the forefront? I'd really love to hear this from you. Why is usually that hard to support? Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Adaptation from Kenya, Kenya Foundation. My question is, and I want to be guided because I'm really touched, because we need to give back to our communities. If we have community at heart, and we are brought up with different ways, we are working albums, but are we giving back to our communities? Are we bringing those ones that have benefited for a fund drive so that they can also give back to the same community instead of looking to the West? How are we helping ourselves to give back to our fellow men in the village? Thank you.
Whose responsibility is it to lift Africa out of its current state? Whose responsibility is it? Until and unless we do not take that agency, that narrative, that change in our hands, and instead we continue, we were colonized, we were resource deprived. Yes, so was India. Many other countries. We went through a very hard, cruel, sad past. We need to come over that and look inside. What role did we have to play in our own colonization? What were our tribal chiefs doing? Were they supplying the slaves? So I'm sorry, this is a very honest and brutal conversation to have, but we cannot escape this responsibility. And like I said previously, if we want to take this agenda further, we have to learn from the past, learn the lesson and let go of the bitterness. And we need to take our narrative in our own hands. Only we can change our reality. So when we say, who is going to do this for me, it should not be that. You need to do something for yourself. You take the first step and then you will see a lot of other people will be out there. But if you haven't taken that step, nobody's going to step up for you. I don't know if anybody has read Yuval Noah Harari's book called Sapiens. Just Sapiens. Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari, and I will just read 1 minute from that. Do you know why humans became the most successful species on Earth? Any idea? So in the essence of time, I will just quickly say that what Harari says, that humans control the planet because they are the only animals that can cooperate both flexibly and in very large numbers. Now, there are other animals like social insects, the bees, the ants, that can cooperate in large numbers, but they don't do so flexibly. Their cooperation is rigid. And then there are, for example, the bees, and then there are, for example, chimpanzees who can cooperate, but only with people from their tribe. I mean, chimpanzees they know, or chimpanzees from the tribe. If they don't know, they will not cooperate with you. It is only humans who can work in such large groups, flexibly organize themselves in such a way, and that is why we are the most successful animals in the world today. Now we can decide whether we want to do this for Ubuntu or is it survival of the fittest. How do we want to use this power that we have of being collectively organized and flexible? It is now our choice. I think that would be my last message.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We need to wrap up. I think allow us to stop there because of time. I'm sure any questions that have not been answered, we can continue with the discussion during the breakout session. So thank you so much. I want to let us appreciate our speakers. And also thank you so much for your time and for listening to our speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet, and to the panel. Time is eclipsing. Or is it telescoping? I'm not sure what the correct word is. But what I love is that our messages are getting reinforced, they're getting tighter and tighter. We are the ones that we've been waiting for. And for change to happen, we have to be the active agents of that change. But we are the ones with the resources to do this. I would like to ask you to indulge me with a small program change, because I realize that we have a breakout session after this, and we're going to have a lightning talk for the breakout session. But when I want to release you for the breakout session, I want to ask you to come back. So I've asked Jenny Hodgson, who is giving us a lightning talk from the Global Fund for Community Foundation, to come and give her talk now and energize us so that we can go into tea, go into the breakout session, and we can go directly to this. Jenny has an invitation for us, and who doesn't like getting invited to things? Welcome, Jenny. Marco, how are we doing? I stand with you and a delicious cup of tea or coffee, so let me try and make this lightning. You need to move the slide, the next one. Thank you. The slide is not sliding. So, this is the invitation. Do you want to be inspired by new ways of deciding and doing that are emerging around the world that center dignity, equity, and trust, and that recognize the resources and inherent power of communities? Yes, okay. Come to Bogota in December for the Shift the Power Summit. Okay, that's my talk. It's not. So I wanted to tell you about the summit in Bogota. Bogota is in Colombia. It's a very, very long way away. And you may wonder, what the heck fire does this conversation have to do with something in Bogota? But what I want to do in this talk is to tell you why the experiences of the last 20 years in Africa around philanthropy development, and in East Africa specifically, are intrinsically part of the story that leads us to Bogota. So back in the early 2000s, I was working as a consultant for the Ford Foundation. You can move to the empty slide now. Okay, this is the empty slide. So briefly, before I come back to East Africa, I want to talk about systems change in philanthropy and development. We have an incumbent system, a dominant system. Or you can go back, sorry, go back to the empty one. I haven't got there yet. Okay, then you can leave it. You can leave it. I'm sorry, I can't coordinate brain and visual. So we know that the system of development aid, which was designed after the Second World War, before many countries in Africa were independent, it was a completely colonial proposition, is broken. The system is broken. It needs to reform and transform. We know that despite decades of development aid and its slightly more flexible friend philanthropy, we're still
grappling with green issues, with these issues. Global inequality is on the rise. The richest hold the most, and the tiny percentage of the population holds most of the money. And the tiny amount of money that continues to go directly to organizations in the South. Although we're talking about it, nothing is really changing. Next slide, please. We know we have systemic issues, and those have been surfaced in the last few days. We have a system that's based on isomorphic mimicry. That means you recognize the thing that looks like you. So donors recognize organizations that look like what they need them to look like. And so we have a hierarchy of civil society organizations whose sunshine is the donor, not the community. And people just are numbers left at the edges. Next slide, please. We have a system that loves linearity. So the donor identifies a problem, puts money into it, it's siloed, it's going to be water, education, whatever. Money comes in, report comes out, it gets checked, and the problem is solved. How long do we have to operate in this system that clearly doesn't work? Next slide, please, which is blue one. So, back in 2002, I was working as a consultant to the Ford Foundation on something that was called the East African Philanthropy Learning Group. It was actually a program whose origins came from the United States around work to develop philanthropy amongst poorer, marginalized communities in the United States, particularly in rural areas. The idea of, could you start a conversation with communities which started to center assets and start build conversation that way rather than from the proposition around money. So, in the context of systems change, the East African Association of Grant Makers was a bit supply driven. It came from a Ford Foundation program, from a Ford Foundation program officer who was in a bit of a hurry because her term wasn't going to last forever. But it did coincide with some interesting conversations around, what does philanthropy mean in East Africa and Africa more broadly? So while Becky was doing his PhD at WITS looking at systems of solidarity in Zimbabwe, this was looking at some of the institutional forms of philanthropy that were in East Africa, looking at the Kabaka Foundation, the Retansi Trust, Kenya Community Development Foundation, and saying, are these the institutions that can help to start to nourish this idea of organized philanthropy? And a lot of that work, which was looking at both cultures of giving, of reciprocity, of mutuality and solidarity at a community level, but also institutions that were about that notion of Ubuntu, of private resources being deployed for public good, started back in the early 2000s. And when the East Africa Association of Grant Makers was established, it really was a step into the dark. Who knew whether there was a thing there or not? And I think the story of what is now EAPN was, as was described yesterday by Becky, the moment when whoever was leading EAPN at the time said, we're broke, do you guys want this or not? That idea of something that was owned by a donor to start with, starting to build ownership from the ground up. Now, the organization that I run, the Global Fund for Community Foundation, has been informed by those two questions. What are the systems that already exist and are overlooked? And what are the structures, the infrastructure that can nurture and harness different forms of giving? Next slide, please. So yesterday we had a conversation around power in the afternoon plenary. And I think a lot of what we're seeing in this emergent system is the distinction between old power and new power. Old power is finite. I have it, you don't. You've got it, she doesn't. New power power, and if you've read the book New Power, you'll know this, is the logic of the internet. That actually power lies in relationships, like the electricity lines through which electricity moves, the hubs, the nodes. Energy is in the system. It's not held in our sector by a single institution or organization. So the idea of new power is how do we harness the power of the collective, the power of us. Next slide, please. In the context of philanthropy, again, I think the East Africa experience is important because the East African Association of Grantmakers and then the East African Philanthropy Network has touched on these three different types of philanthropy from the very beginning. The philanthropy of those with resources. And we know that the experience often of those with resources deploying them to communities is they're sort of dropped. We've heard lots at this conference about how donors are trying to get better, directing resources from afar closer to the ground. But often that is the experience of philanthropy and certainly of development aid. You don't know where the money came from, it came to do something very specific within a specific time and then it's gone. I think this notion of philanthropy with the grassroots is also becoming really important and interesting. Participatory grant making, where communities sit together with whoever the donor or representative is, or without in many instances, and they decide how resources are deployed. And finally, the fact that philanthropy has always been there. Systems of Ubuntu, of solidarity, of mutuality have always been there. But the dominant system, and certainly, actually most donors continue to ignore or overlook the fact that there are resources in communities. And they start to make people believe they have no resources. If you hear it often enough that you're a beneficiary or you're in need, you start to believe it. And from the very beginning, having organizations like the Kenya Community Development Foundation as a member of EAPN was critically important because from the very beginning, KCDF was working with communities to mobilize their resources, to mobilize their voices, to mobilize their power. It's very different when you go to the table and put your money on it and you say, this is what we're putting down, where's yours? And this is what we've been really, really bad at in this sector, is convincing ourselves that money drives change. I received an email from a partner of ours in Poland yesterday, the Feminist Fund, very cool organization, and she said, the biggest mistake philanthropy makes is that it thinks that money drives change. It's the energy of activism that drives change. Without that, money can buy nothing. Next slide, please. We're getting to P, don't worry, come on. So over the next few years, this idea of emergence, that actually another way is possible, that rather than just reforming a broken system, we can actually build a new system, I think is essential to the notion of the shift of power idea. That actually, if we start to organize ourselves... Hello? Yes, I can hear you. If we can organize ourselves, if we can break beyond the competition that exists in our sector, there are very few incentives to collaborate in our sector. Because if I tell you my secret, you might tell it to somebody else, to a donor, and get money. So why would I share my secret? But if we can start to harness our collective power and collective voice, actually there are new ways of being heard. And these are some of the examples I'm thinking of the work that Cipsos did during COVID-19, when funders left, NGO representatives left, organizations were left with money in budgets that they couldn't use because it was not meant for COVID response, and actually the forms of giving and solidarity and mutuality that were mobilized and stepped in, we mustn't forget that. That was the system on which we want to build, not to just go back to the old system we had before. Next slide, please. So, for me, none of us do this on our own. It's not one single thunder with one set of partners, one organisation. Across our system, you see these pockets of innovation, of brilliance. Right now, we're holding them all to ourselves. Imagine systems change as multiple tributaries feeding in to a large river. And that river is co-owned, co-designed, co-created by many. And it's an alternative, emergent system made by people, making it up as they go along. Donella Meadows talks about systems change. You have to learn to dance with systems. You can't go in and know what the answer is. You have to feel the room. You have to feel the vibe, and then you respond accordingly. So how do we move out of our institutions, move from our desks, to start thinking about building this collective vision? Like these. So in 2016, the first Shift to Power Summit was held in Johannesburg, South Africa. We started off with no money, a plan that we would get about 100 people together in Joburg. We ended up with 400 people from 60 countries coming to South Africa. And we started to use the hashtag Shift to Power for that event. We started to talk about power because this is a very polite sector. We talk about partnership. We talk very politely to each other as if we're really partners without power differentials between us. And also that this was a proposition not just about tweaking institutional forms, but about unlocking power. Let's put power on the table. In 2019, we did a similar event in London with again, partners coming from all over the world. And in order to inform the agenda, we did not a call for session ideas, but a call for ideas. If we want to change from the system we got to the system we want, what are the pathways to that kind of change? And through the wisdom of the crowd, these 13 categories came up. None of us are working on all of them, but we need to know that somebody is working on each of them, right? Because on their own, they won't work. So for our organisation, the Global Fund for Community Foundations, our entry point was around community philanthropy. But our idea here was to start saying, if we can start getting these plates spinning, getting these different conversations to merge and emerge, then we can start actually thinking around change across the system. So as we start to think about the journey to Bogota, we're going to be inviting people to engage on these topics. Which one are you working on? Which one do you want to work on? Which one matters to you? Can we kind of co-create and weave conversations that can help produce the new? The other document we're using is in fabric form. Can you change the slide, please? This is the manifesto for change. It's not perfect. It was cooked up on an afternoon in March 2019 by some partners from, well, in this room, the Rethinking Foundation for Civil Society was there, Kenya Community Development Foundation was there, others from across Africa and South Asia, and interestingly, community organisers from the UK. Because our realisation is that this isn't just a north-south thing, this is an institution, structures thing. This is about harnessing energy wherever it is, around people deciding and doing differently. And some of the points on the manifesto, which is a little difficult to read up there, but really touch on what we've been talking about over the last couple of days. Ensure that external funding recognises and respects and builds on local resources, rather than overlooks, underlines, or displaces. I think we've heard quite a lot about that. Move away from building capacity as defined by external actors and requirements to community organising and movement building where capacity doesn't mean being able to just fulfill an audit. It means relevance, rootedness, constituency. So again, this is the second document of fabric form that we wish to use to engage people. But this vision is a bit contrary to how many of us operate in our institutions. That we're stuck in our organisations, our plans, our annual activities, but this vision of can we work towards a future that is negotiated, participatory and widely owned, and that is built through a process of movement generosity rather than success or failure of one the organisation over others. I think that might be the best slide. Okay, I love this. This is where we really need to look today. Should we talk about ecosystems? But actually, do we really learn from ecosystems? In nature, when small fish see a shark, this is what they do. They gather together and they create this enormous fish. So the shark swims away. I don't think we all want to be sharks. I think the world has enough sharks. In the institutional form, actually, in the natural form, they are slightly threatened. But the idea is organizations don't need to wait to be big. You don't need to be big to change things. If you start thinking about scale in the form of networks, of pulling together, of moving together, we can move so much further and so much better together. So this vision of how do we create the shark effect, where multiple edge actions, things happening on the ground, can be joined together and say, this is the system we are waiting for. We're not waiting for funders and INGOs to sit and think through decolonizing aid only and then come to us with the answer. We need to be building our own, and we need to be exercising a social muscle of movement generosity. I think that's the last slide. Oh, so this is the vision. Shift the power, new ways of deciding and doing, that center is a global community, so let's mobilize our relationships, our networks. We may not have money, but we have the ability to connect. Let's celebrate emergent practice, what's bubbling up from the ground, because it's shaped by what's needed on the ground. Measuring what matters, not measuring what funders, only what funders are asking, but allowing measurement and learning to be the process of change itself. People-centered, asset-based. And friends, I invite you, even if you don't make it to Bogota, to engage in a series of activities that will be rolling up so that East Africa is represented, well, in Africa more broadly, in that conversation in Bogota. Because it started with you all. It started with conversations like yours. So this is already your story, your journey. And it's very exciting to see it picked up in another part of the world. Thank you for listening, and apologies for standing before talking.
Thank you, Jenny. Mobilizing people. Let us be the fish that overcomes the shark of the system. I'd like to just introduce the sessions that we're going into for the breakout sessions, which is really all about powering the people and the power that people have in leveraging collective and social capital for impact. The first group will be talking about building resilience, and we'll be asking questions about what it means to be resilient and resourceful in ways that actually strengthen us as a sector. The session will be moderated by Jessica Horn of the Ford Foundation and will be in the summer room. The second breakout session is from the system we have to the system we want, and leads from what Jenny was sharing just now around shifting the power movement and how different organizations are experimenting with and advancing community-led philanthropy. That conversation will be moderated by Susan Jambi-Odongo, who's been doing a lot of research in terms of community philanthropy, and some of the results of the research and the findings will be shared there. That will take place in the autumn room. And then the last one is the localization debate, right? And how this agenda can actually be used to move from debate and discourse to actual tangible outcomes. We will learn from several different players who are active in this space, and that conversation will be hosted by Lizzie Kawoya of the Border Initiative in the winter room. So group 1 in summer room, group 2 in the autumn room, and group 3 in the winter room. There will be tea and coffee served, and then you will carry your tea and coffee to the room, right? Yes? Because we're trying to make sure that we do finish on time. That will allow us to have
A wonderful relaxing afternoon together. And I know that there's also people trying to catch flights today. So I encourage you to grab your tea and snacks both on this floor and on the floor below, and be in the breakout session rooms by 11:40. Thank you very much. Oh, and pass by the exhibition if you're not grabbing tea.